So, how many of you this weekend had barbecues, fireworks, gatherings of friends and family? Sort of the traditional things that you do for Independence Day, right? I have to tell you, I enjoyed practically not leaving my house, being there all by my lonesome self, and just being with myself. So I didn't do any of the traditional 4th of July weekend activities, and it really supported me in just getting a little clearer about what it is that I wanted to share with you. I think the other traditions that we talk about for 4th of July is to be in gratitude for this country. And what was interesting to me is that I was seeing posts here and there. You're like, well, I'm not sure how grateful I am around this time right now, this year, right? And it reminded me of some of that feeling that some people have expressed in the past, like, don't give me your thoughts and your prayers, right? Like, take action. And there's a part of me that recognizes the reasons why some people may not want to celebrate as much or may think that prayers and thoughts are not enough. And I also recognized within myself, and I had time to think about, there's a lot of things that can be worked on and needs to be worked on, and there's a whole lot that I can be grateful for. You know, I was really recognizing that when I was 7 years old is when my parents moved here from Ecuador. And so I was just sitting with that, the fact that they moved to this country and sort of what inspired them to do so. And one of the things that came to me is like that hope and that faith that they had. You know, the hope that they could achieve the dreams and the visions and the aspirations that were within them and for not only themselves, but for their family. And also the faith that this would be the place that could really support them in achieving those dreams. And as I sat with that, I really recognized the power of hope and faith. Because I think that in the midst of challenges, in the midst of struggles, whether they are personal and individual or they are collective, can we recognize the power of having hope, of being able to look at the challenges and difficulties and the things that need to be looked at with a sense of, and we're going to get through this, and there is power within me to move through any challenge, and there is love at hand, and here we are walking this journey hand in hand with each other, and here we are walking this journey in God. Can we have that faith, even when things get a little challenging or a lot challenging, to be able to see beyond that, to recognize that God is at hand? And I have to tell you that one of the things that came up for me is that I am my parents' hope and faith being expressed. And I carry that hope and that faith within me also. And I know that sometimes I can feel like I'm looking at the world through rose-colored eyes. And sometimes I can be corny about it, you know. And sometimes I can even feel corny about some of what I share with you. And there is power in it. There is power in recognizing that not only is there hope and faith within us, but that it activates something within us to be a powerful presence in the world and to be able to move through whatever it is that we may be moving through, again, individually or collectively. When I talk about what's next for America, the reality is that question is really about what's next for me. What's next for me? Who am I choosing to be in this moment? And it's an invitation for you to ask yourself the same question. What's next for you? How are you responding to whatever life experiences that you may be moving through? How are we responding to the things that need to be responded to in our world? There is work to be done, and there's so much to be grateful for. And I believe and I see and I trust that there is amazing things in store for all of us, that there are amazing things being birthed and being lived into not only in the world, but in our country and in my life. And if you don't believe it for yourself, know that I believe it for you. There is something amazing taking place within you. There is something powerful that is at hand, for I know that my faith and my hope lies from what's within me. The very presence and the very essence that is God. And today, as corny as it may sound to some of you, when I say what is next for America, my answer is love. That's what's next. love. And I can sit with the question of then how is love meant to be expressed through me? How is it that I am meant to bring about a greater feeling and experience of love for myself, my loved ones, this community, the world itself? And I know that in some of the challenges, big and small, that we have individually and collectively, there are many different things that we can do in response to them. And I trust that we will do all those things. The question is, from what consciousness are we doing it? From what consciousness? Is it from a consciousness of love? Is it from a consciousness of harmony? Is it from a consciousness of unity? So that we don't add to the disharmony, but instead we are the bridge, right? We are that bridge of God's presence and the experience of God's presence in the world. And it all happens through the space of the heart. It all happens through our own opening to recognizing what's at hand and how may I empower myself. Because that's some of the things that I see sometimes and that I experience when I'm moving through challenges. Sometimes I feel disempowered, right? How many of you have faced things in your life or look at what's going on in parts of the world or even in our own backyard and sometimes just ask yourself, what can I do? Right? And feeling that disempowerment. Well, let me tell you, we have the greatest tool at our disposal. When we are feeling disempowered, when we are feeling hopeless, the invitation is for us to recognize and have faith that the power of love is within us, because the power of God is within us. The power of God is at hand, and we are always able to stand firm in that, and we're always able to call it forth in greater and greater ways. Yes, things may be needing to change outside of us, but first and foremost, we got to do the work to change inside of us. So that when we are living into whatever we discern is our action, that we're doing so from a place of love, from a place of recognizing that not only what we do, but how we do it can bring about that change. And so that's the great question. What is the consciousness by which I'm doing the things that I'm doing? And how can I do more from the consciousness of love? Now, this year, I believe that, yes, there's a lot going on for people within their own lives and within the life of our country. And I believe that in the moments of greatest struggle and the greatest moments of the greatest challenge also comes about the greatest change, the greatest evolution, the greatest experience of God. Have you not recognized that sometimes it's in your boldest moments that you have your best moments? And so when you see this harmony out in the world and it gets the better of you or it's calling you and it's asking you to live in that space, to be bold enough to say, wait a minute, no, that may be something that's going on outside of me, but I am choosing differently. And so when there is, for example, the choice that we make of letting go of resentment and letting go of forgiveness, bold move. When we choose to have courage despite our fears, bold. When we recognize that sometimes we have been raised in a world that believes in conditional love, and we choose unconditional love, bold. And the more that we recognize that it is in our bold moments that we have our best moments, then we can recognize that there is something at hand for us here, and the best is yet to be. Because who I am and how I understand myself as an expression of the divine and as an expression of love is just being birthed. It's just opening up, and it's expanding and deepening me in ways that I can't even recognize in this moment. And so for us to have a positive impact on the world and in this country, we have to look at our willingness, I believe, to be that love. And sometimes being willing is a bold move. Think about that. How many times I know I got to be love, and you just leave it there. Oh yeah, I know that this is probably the way that I should answer. I'm feeling like this is how, love would respond, or God would respond, or the Christ in me would respond. But we don't have the willingness to actually live it out. And so willingness is such an important part of what we're invited into. Now, I mentioned what is next for America is what is really truly about me and the invitation that I have for you to step deeper into love. Where it came from was that, many of you know that I was on vacation, and I was thinking about what to speak to you all about on this weekend. I don't know why, but the story of the Good Samaritan just came up in consciousness for me. And I thought, okay, well, what does that have to do with, July 4th weekend? And it has everything to do with July 4th weekend to me, because it has everything to do with how we are relating to each other and how we are being love in expression and bringing harmony. That song I love, I actually mentioned it at the first service, the Make Me a Channel of Your Peace, the St. Francis song. How many of you knew that song? How many of you, like when you hear that song, like something within you is like, oh yeah, no, that feels true, right? Like that feels true. And I recognize something. It's not just make me a channel of love. We already are the channels of love. The question is, are we going to be open to let the flood of love come off from us? Right? We're already the channel of peace. Everything that God is already within me. My question is, am I willing to open up the floodgates, to be the peace, to be the love, to be the harmony, to be the understanding, and to be the compassion in the world? And so here is the story of the Good Samaritan, and I read it, and I have to tell you, it's so simple and so challenging. Have you ever experienced that? That sometimes the things that seem the simplest are actually the most challenging. Because it is a simple message, love, take care of each other. But how many times have we forgotten that? How many times are we in the reaction of what is going on, that we're not responding from the place within us that is God's love? And so the invitation is to look at that and to check in on that and ask ourselves, what would love do? And how is love asking me to respond to my life and the things that are going on? Now, I have to tell you, there was a little synchronicity here so I chose the Bible story to share with you today. And then during our trip, we went to the Cathedral of Chartres. Somebody tried to teach me how to say it right after the first service. The Cathedral of Chartres in France, and there's a big labyrinth there. And as you are walking into the labyrinth, there was a volunteer. By the way, there was a Unity connection. She was from Unity of Minneapolis, all the way in France, volunteering that day. And she's there, and she says, well, before you walk the labyrinth, you have to look back at the stained glass window that's behind you. And that window is meant to tell you God is here. But then when you first walk into the labyrinth and you make your first step and you're going right, look in front of you to that window, because that window tells you that God is with you on this journey, that God is with you in life, that God is with you in labyrinth. And believe it or not, the stained glass window depicted the Good Samaritan. And that's how God shows up for us. And that is, I believe, how we are asked to show up for each other. Now, one of the things that you have to recognize with the story is that it actually answers the question somebody poses to Jesus and says, how can I inherit, or how can I have eternal life? How can I have eternal life? And to us, in Unity, that's code for how can I live heaven on earth? How can I always be in a consciousness of oneness with God? And in that answer, Jesus says, just two simple things. Love God and love each other. Love your neighbor. Simple, right? Is it? Simple. Just a few words. Love God and love your neighbor. So as anybody would most likely do, not everybody, and especially not here, the person's like, well, who's my neighbor? Trying to get a little pass maybe of like who they should love, right? And who they don't need to love, right? Who's my neighbor? And that's when Jesus uses the story and says, well, there was this man who was on his journey and he got robbed and he was beat up and he was left for dead on the road. And a priest came by, saw what happened, and walked right on by. A Levite passed. And a Levite at that time, they were considered very holy people, and they were sort of like the assistants to the priest. And so the Levite passed by, and once again, didn't do a thing. But all of a sudden, it was the Good Samaritan that stopped, saw what was going on, and through different actions was part of the healing of this person that had been left to die. Easy peasy, right? Helping each other out. And inspiring and challenging. Now, it was really interesting because Jesus was talking to Jewish people, right? Sharing this story. And at that time, actually, the Jewish people didn't get along with the Samaritans. They actually thought less of the Samaritans. They thought that the Samaritans were not very good and not very nice people. And here Jesus was saying, actually, this person that you are judging is the hero of this story. This person that you are judging also has God's love and God's light and God's power within them. And this person that you are judging also has the ability for good, also has God's good within them. How many times have I watched the TV and forgotten that God expresses in everyone? That there is the potential for good in everyone. And when I question that, I separate myself from them. When I question that, when I don't recognize that God is at hand in some way or another, not only in my life, but in the individuals that are around me, all of a sudden I'm just moving into the place of the ego. I'm not being very bold. I'm just responding or reacting from the place of the ego. And so, one, Jesus is saying, don't assume that people don't have good within them, and give them the opportunity to express that good. The other thing is that it's not about prophetizing, right? Like the principles. The priest may have taught a good Sunday lesson, but was he living the principles? So it's not about just what we believe, it's what we put into practice and how we move from theory into a lived experience. Our boldest moments are the best moments. Our boldest moments are what changes not only us, but changes humanity in greater and greater ways. From 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 13 through 18, it says, "Be at peace amongst yourselves, and we urge you, beloved, to admonish the idlers, to encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with all of them. See that none of you repays evil for evil, but always seek to do good to one another and to all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God." God, there's a lot to unpack in that passage. How many times do we get like that desire to repay evil for evil? Or they harmed me, or they're trying to harm me. I'm going to harm them, or I'm going to separate myself from them. I'm not going to see them through the eyes of God. I'm not going to see them as holy expressions of God. I am going to create more walls than to invite them into a bridge with me. And remember, it says to love God first. Love God first. So it says right there, to rejoice always, to pray without ceasing, and to give thanks in all circumstances. One of the things that came to me is that, how do I give thanks? Yes, it's nice to say thank you. But what other actions are we taking from that place of gratitude? And so, can we act from the place of love in gratitude for God, in gratitude for our oneness with God? And how can we have peace amongst ourselves? And I'll share, not just with each other, but peace within us. How many times are we warring with ourselves? I know I got to war with myself when I see something I don't like, or I'm in a situation that may be unpleasing or difficult or challenging, and I'm like, there's the war between my ego and my spirit. That which tells me I want to beat them rather than I want to invite them along. That thing that wants to be righteous rather than to be sharing and be loving. Am I alone in that? Do we have those moments? And what do we do with those moments so that we're not responding to others or to the challenges, but that rather we are responding to the God of our being, and it is from that place. Now there's a Saint Tikhon of Sadansk. He's a Russian Orthodox saint that I found on social media. This quote says, "To look upon another, his weakness, his sins, his faults, his defects, is to look upon one who is suffering." Do we forget that sometimes? This is very important. Do not look upon him with judgmental eyes of comparison, noting the sins you assume you'd never commit. Rather, see him as a fellow human being who is in need of the very healing of which you are in need. Help him, love him, pray for him, do unto him as you would have him do unto you. How are we doing that? How am I doing that? In moments of challenge, in moments of struggles, in moments of feeling that separation and not knowing what to do, in those moments of feeling disempowered, am I able to go within? Am I able to lean on the very love that is God and able to respond from that place? I have to tell you, when I sat with that, I said to myself, not enough. Not enough, and that's the challenge for me going forward. How can I be more of that? How can I respond when I'm watching TV or doing the work of the elections and the campaigning and the calls, doing it from the consciousness of love rather than the consciousness of beating them, of separating myself from them? Now, I'm going to get a little metaphysical with you, because not only is this how I believe we can live into that hope and that faith and that vision that I believe we all have for this country and for our lives, but also, that story of the Good Samaritan, if we take it metaphysically, and everything in metaphysically means that we're all of what's in that story, and we look at that is how many of us have been beating ourselves up? How many of us have laid ourselves there on the ground, right, because of the stresses of being resentful, the energy that drains us, as Shantae was saying us earlier, that which drains us, that which keeps us unhealthy. We know that holding resentments, holding anger, holding guilt, holding fear, all of those things place with our bodies. And so here we are on the ground waiting to be lifted up again. And what is that lifts us up? The recognition of Christ's presence within us. The recognition of that divine love that we are. And the invitation of that divine love to be what carries us forward in whatever it is that we are meant to do and whatever it is that we are meant to experience. And our body then is being robbed of its life by these thoughts of separation, by these thoughts of resentment, by us versus them. And it is the Christ love and how we share it that brings us back to center, that brings us back to wholeness, and that is the healing that we are searching for. That brings us not only a greater sense of peace in the mind, in the body, but in the heart. And so my invitation as we are looking at what's next is to ask ourselves, how can I be more kind in my interactions? How can I be more kind in my discussions? How can I speak and act from a place of love by engendering love that is within my heart? To show compassion and kindness in my daily life. Sometimes we don't give enough attention to the day-to-day activities and the day-to-day connections and how powerful they are to create the change that we're looking for. There's a new word that I learned through Mary McHenry, one of our past board members. She put it on Facebook yesterday. Mellorism. I don't even think I'm saying it right. It's such a new word for me. Mellorism. And it is the belief that you can contribute to positive change and improve the world through acts of love, creativity, compassion, and kindness. I know it can be a very simple message, but it's a challenging message. Are we willing to be more kind? Unity on the Bay, are you willing to be more kind? Yes? Are you willing to be more loving? Yes? Are you willing to look at the ways in which sometimes it's hard and bold to be loving and do it anyways? Yes? In order for us to heal what's outside of us, we have to heal ourselves. And the way that we heal ourselves is going deeper and deeper to the love of God that is within and knowing that that is the place that we act from. We change the world by changing ourselves and then acting from that deepened understanding of God's love. We are not strangers. We are not enemies with anyone. We are each other's neighbors. Our boldest moments are our best moments. So act from the place of kindness, act from the place of love, and experience the kindness, the love, and the peace that God is and is intended to be lived by us. Unity on the Bay, that is how we create what's next for America, because we get to choose from the place of freedom what we want to experience in America. Namaste, and let's continue to do the good work. Amen.